Waiting for what?
Welcome everyone. Thanks for coming. I know it's spring break and I've had the flu. That's why we postponed this one. So I know a lot of people have had the flu as well. Beautiful weather, but we still got the flu. So I wanted to welcome you all here. This is particularly exciting. For those of you who know me, I actually spent a year when I first came here 9 years ago, video interviewing VCs and women founders on the shortfall of funding for women, and lived like a starving artist, but in the flow, so it was fabulous. And I put an ebook together at the end of that year, which I've been giving away for free since. And so any opportunity to highlight women in the ecosystem, I'm always eager to do, because I think we bring such fabulous qualities and experience and knowledge that men don't have. We've all got our strengths, right? So I'm really happy about this panel. And I'm wanting to, our host tonight,
Thank you.
Shepherd Mullen. Thank you, Nadi.
Thank you so much, Pino. Hi, everyone. My name is Nadine Nikonova. I work right here at Shepherd Mullen's San Francisco office. Welcome. Thank you all for coming. Thank you to each and every one of our panelists for coming. I am just so excited and happy and honored to have each of you here. So thank you. So as I said, my name is Nady. I am in the antitrust practice group here. I'm an attorney. I get to do lots of things involving competition, but I also get to think about how blockchain and crypto technology, what issues can arise in terms of antitrust laws here in the United States and in Europe. And I was telling Olga, I know it's the last thing on everyone's mind, but I think it should be toward the forefront and it is important. So I'm so excited to learn from all of you. Thank you for coming, and thank you all for coming, and thank you.
Thanks. And Nadi, maybe you could put some business cards out on the table if anyone wants to connect with you.
Sure, I would be happy to. You guys can also find me on the firm website or LinkedIn. Just come and chat with me.
Great, thank you very much. Okay, I'm going to pass it over to Karen now. Karen's going to moderate the panel and she'll let all the panelists introduce themselves. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Pima. So we're excited today because what we're really going to talk about is how we are dealing with the bear market and what the growth we actually see. So what I think is valuable for a lot of panels is to actually have people who are in the space, who are experiencing the day-to-day transactions and what's happening. So our goal is to deliver real value that you can take away with you as little nuggets of information. So myself, I have a startup called Startup Roll Call, and what we're providing is startup hacks for everybody from the entrepreneur to the VC who's trying to figure out what's the best way to gather information. We have a platform that automates and provides efficiency for VCs dealing with their portfolio companies and allows startups to easily communicate with potential VCs. And so the excitement about the blockchain space is that it's a technology that really is revolutionary how we're dealing with trust. Before then, there wasn't a technical tool that was provided a trustworthy information, and now that is there, and it's really revolutionizing what we are seeing. And so the great thing about, you'll see from this panel, is we have a VC representative, we have Daisy who's representing social justice, we also have someone who deals with the marketing side as well as the strategy side. So we're really a full-rounded panel that's going to deal with. So we're going to dive in right now, and we're going to go down the line and have each one introduce themselves, and then we'll have 3 or 4 questions, and then we'll open it up to the community and ask. So our first person is...
Hi guys, my name is Harshita Khilari, and I'm a co-founder and general partner at Decipher Capital. Decipher Capital is a seed and pre-seed stage venture capital fund that focuses on blockchain and blockchain adjacent investments. So a little bit about me. My background, it started out in institutional investing. So I went to school at Columbia and got recruited by this really large mutual fund out of LA called Capital Group. And I started out doing innovation and strategy for them and ended up creating a corporate venture capital arm for Capital Group. and then switched gears and focused more on the investing side, covered oil out of Europe, and then specialty chemicals back out of LA. And then I thought that it was an amazing job, but it kind of left me wanting to be more on the operator side because you were so distanced from the companies that you were covering, most of which were publicly traded equities. So my version of dealing with that was to completely quit my job and take on a CFO role at a really small ed tech company in LA. And then about halfway through last year, this guy right here, Johnson Nakano, who's my fellow co-founder, or at least one of my fellow co-founders and fellow GPs, came knocking on my door with this idea about starting a fund in the blockchain space. So that's how all of that started.
Hi everyone, my name is Daisy Ozim, and I'm the founder of Resilient Wellness, but I just want to backtrack a little bit because not only am I about the social justice, social impact, but it's really about how do we develop blockchain platforms that are really addressing like real world issues. So I run the Blockchain for Social Justice collaborative, so we have an incubator program where we actually bring in projects and we teach like local government leaders, social impact leaders, social entrepreneurs how to develop and launch their own projects. We've run one cohort, we're gonna be running another one in June. We have a development curriculum, so teaching, folks from these communities how to become blockchain developers. And then we do like policy and research work. We actually held a policy event at Ogle's place. But I guess I'm here speaking really more about Resilient Wellness, which is, I've been running this organization for the past 5 years. It's a public health social enterprise, and we really just focus on how do we address chronic illness effectively. So we have a blockchain platform coming out. So I came into the blockchain space after spending many years actually here in San Francisco working on public policy issues, public health issues. I used to be like the vice president for the cannabis board. I'm on the public health commission. So that's how I got into blockchain because I was tired of the whole nonprofit rat race, like waiting on local government funding. I felt like social enterprise was a way to be able to do good, but still generate revenue and not have to constantly be like looking for funding and whatnot. So that's how I got into the blockchain space in about 2015.
Hi, I'm Cindy Anders. I've been in the blockchain space more recently. Prior to that, I was actually in telco and telecoms and IT, and I headed up marketing for Ericsson and Intel for Sub-Saharan Africa. So originally born in South Africa, moved to the US and got into the blockchain space and really enjoying the marketing side of the blockchain space. I think there's a lot of hype around blockchain, especially from a marketing point of view. I think what I'll talk about today we'll focus on is how one can tackle blockchain from a marketing perspective. And I also think in terms of emerging markets, how do we look at new models, new economies in terms of blockchain, and how do we scale into emerging markets? Because they're some of the places in the world that really need blockchain. There's a lot of crime and corruption in various countries and continents around the world. So I think from a marketing point of view, it's a very exciting space to be in, and I'm looking forward to sharing the panel today. Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Olga Matt. I feel like those are my friends. I hang with these girls everywhere I go. If we don't speak together, we like sit in the back and make that kids, that students. So this is a great panel for this reason. I'm really excited to be here. I'm VP of strategy at QuantStamp. QuantStamp is on the intersection of security and blockchain. So we make sure that code doesn't have vulnerabilities, so your assets on blockchain don't disappear. As we know, blockchain and smart contracts can hold quite a lot of assets. They could be tangible, like real estate and financial assets, or they could be your reputation and privacy. So very, very, very valuable assets, and they attract crooks to take advantage of vulnerabilities. And so we're building protocol, we're building tools, we're providing services to make sure that your assets are safe. Before I came to blockchain, I've been in technology for a long time, for over 15 years. Before I came to blockchain, I was an attorney. I've been a general counsel at numerous startups. I was at a company called Visa in Foster City at some point, and at some point I was at a law firm. My jump into technology was right when I got into law school, Yahoo acquired Flickr, and it had a team of PhDs from Berkeley. And my job was to open the Berkeley labs and to help the team transition into what was known as Yahoo Berkeley. And we had so much fun. And the reason I mention it is because that was 2004, 2005, right at the time where the smartphones are about to show up, and the cloud is about to show up, and the GPS was about to show up. And we were sitting around the table thinking what's possible, coming up with crazy idea. And the best part that all the crazy ideas are companies now, like the Instacart and the Facebook and all of those things that we were like, oh yeah, that would be nice, that would be nice, that would never happen. Every single one of those things happen. And so what I like about blockchain is that we are at that stage, we're like, oh, wouldn't this be nice? Wouldn't solving social problems would be nice? And I say, it's all possible, we just have to do it.
Thank you guys very much. And I think what is valuable is you see a big growth of backgrounds here. The interesting thing, I've been in technology for a long time as well. I think the difference with the blockchain is this concept of community, is that I think Olga touched upon it, that we all have known each other from different spaces, is that blockchain really is about community and how can, as a group, you really change the world and how can you change what is happening. And so from my perspective, what I've seen in blockchain is the bear market has really taken people from going from the playground where it's all about doing whatever you want to actually implementing rigor and the thought that what problem are we solving? And I come from the sales side after I'm a recovering developer. So the interesting thing is I was always pounded the question of, so what? Tell me, that's a feature, so what? Why do I care about that? And that's what I really see happening in the bear market, is people being asked, so what? Why do I care about being trustful? Why do I care about transparency? And people answering these questions. And that kind of leads into the next area where we're gonna start with Olga and to kind of go down the line as far as if each one of you can talk about how your company and the companies you're working with, how are they dealing with the bear market? What are they doing differently from 2 years ago, a year ago, where there was FOMO and everything else happening? And what are they doing now? What's the so what behind what's happening?
So we are very consistent in the way we approach the world, our customers and their problems. We just work hard. Whether it's bear market or crypto spring or whatever you call it, I happen to work at a company where everyone is a super achiever, works really hard, and really wants to create products that are useful to our clients and really solve the problem of security. So our approach has not changed. If anything, we've been working much harder, and that's not a question of winter. And we look at San Francisco, what winter looks like. So from our point of view, winter or not, we have work to do.
So I grew up in Ohio, so I can definitely know what winter looks like. So the interesting question for you, Olga, is like, what customers, are you seeing a different blend of customers, or are you seeing the same type of customers? Are you seeing, in a non-permissionable space, there's a lot of gaming, or in the permissionable space, there's a lot of enterprise. Are you seeing the mix change from a customer perspective?
So we're an unusual company in some way, is that our customers are very diverse. We have crypto native companies, we work with exchanges, we work with enterprises. So we kind of work with full spectrum at all sizes. And you're right, our customers react to alleged winter in different ways. We do see that our crypto native customers tend to be a little bit more sensitive to crypto, likely because they have some incentives or money tied up or assets tied up there. From the enterprise point of view, you don't really see that. This guy is, like you will never find a CFO who wants to pay in crypto at a Fortune 500 or Fortune 1000 or any really public or most private companies that have been around. So their treasury is not, or assets are not tied up in crypto. They are actually probably even more excited than they were before. They lived through what you refer to marketing hype of blockchain for the last couple of years, and now everybody kind of got to the point that we need to do more than marketing. And so now a lot of them are doing pilots and experimenting and playing with the tool, and that's what we see, and we help them to do that securely. We teach them best practices, we audit, we give them tools, and really making sure that they learn from this, they find the one place where blockchain makes sense, and then they scale. And presumably they've scaled before and they know how to do that very well.
So I think this kind of comes into with Cindy Ann's background of really being a strategic advisor and having so much experience in marketing, especially globally, that you probably can address the growth that you're seeing with the companies that you're dealing with, and what are they targeting?
Fantastic, thanks Karen. Great question. So I got into blockchain beginning of last year, and it was definitely not crypto winter. It was probably crypto summer. It was booming, and there was a lot of investment, there was a lot of hype. We saw a lot of companies throwing a lot of money at blockchain and crypto. And companies were sometimes uncautious with their marketing budget and overspending, and there were big yacht parties, and it was the early days and people were very excitable about it. And I think what's happened is crypto winter, or the bear market, has forced blockchain startups to actually, and most blockchain and crypto companies, to actually tighten their purse strings and become wise about how they spend. And I think it's really great because you see a lot of good strategy coming out of a shoestring budget, because people have to be nimble, they have to be innovative, they have to think outside the box. Whereas in the past, I was at New York City Blockchain Week last year, and people were throwing money at the problem. There was just yacht parties everywhere, and, all the Lambos and the FOMO.
So I recently read the book Traction by the founder of DuckDuckGo, which I think is a great book for entrepreneurs. It talks about the different channels. Can you talk about one or two of the channels that you see from a marketing perspective that's effective in the crypto space, crypto/blockchain?
Yeah, so I think a lot of it is about community. If you're not in community, it's a big issue. A lot of business happens on Telegram, Telegram, Slack, across social media platforms. It's really important to be a part of the community. I think that's super important. Also from another channel, I would say is just direct, marketing automation, creating go-to-market strategies that are impactful. I'd say demand gen, creating events that are the right bespoke tailor-made events that create bespoke messages for investors or big companies, and creating strategies that are impactful. So I think that's super important. On a side note, I advised to the Bureau and Dispatch protocol, and what I helped them with last year was expanding into emerging markets. So I worked on a project with them, with IBM, and we looked at supply chains within Africa. So we looked at 4 countries within Africa and how we could go into making food sustainable and tracking where food sources come from in Africa. The other thing we looked at was foreign investment, because a lot of US companies invest into Africa, and one doesn't know where the foreign investment's going. So blockchain could help that problem, help trace all the foreign investments and the UN aid and various other things.
That's really exciting. But I think, and that kind of goes into the social impact piece of it. And, I had the wrong impression that, the social justice piece might, with the crypto winter, might not have as much money out there. And it was great to talk to Daisy to hear that there's growth out there. And so that's really exciting that's the social impact side of the house is not being left behind. So I'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah, I think because they have impact investment and then they have social impact investment, then they have the whole entrepreneurship space, and they have the social entrepreneurship space. And some of the things that have been happening is the social entrepreneurship space is just now catching up to the blockchain and the ways in which it can be applied for social impact issues. And that's where we come in. It has been like down in terms of like the crypto trading, but in terms of like the partnerships and all other things, it's been actually like growing. We have a partnership with UC Berkeley, and we're actually going to be running the blockchain courses for their extension school for like enterprises that want to learn more, or local government that wants to learn more, for entrepreneurs and whatnot that want to learn more about blockchain, or certificate course. In terms of it being a bear market, I think this is actually, it sucks, right? Because we're not making as much money as we could, and as much as we were. But I think it's actually good because it's weeding out the bad actors, and a lot of the different platforms that do not have a viable use case are starting to actually get like pushed out. So platforms that can be lucrative and can be beneficial are starting to rise to the surface. And I think that needed to happen because that's what was running the crypto space in the first place.
No, and I think that, so interesting, can you talk about the classes? If somebody is interested in learning more, it's great that you're getting involved in that. Can you talk about that too?
Yeah.
How would people find out about that?
So I actually just was in Maryland because Morgan State University called me there to come train their whole faculty in like blockchain, right? So these are just some of the things that we've been doing. I think now that it's becoming a little bit more mainstream because everyone's learning about Bitcoin, but they don't understand that blockchain can have no currency. You still have to teach people about that distinction. What's been happening is more folks like, okay, outside of the currency, we want to know how the technology works and how we can apply it to the education system, to public policy, to budgeting. So that's where a lot of the focus has been. In terms of the courses, like I said, we have an incubator that happens twice a year. The next one's going to be happening in June, and we're just bringing in local government leaders, social impact projects, etc. And we teach them from start to finish how to design their use case, token economics, their white papers, how to fundraise, etc. And I feel like that's the best that we can do, just given how quick this space is moving. I did want to add, last piece, that in regards to social impact and the bear market, there's a really cool website called positiveblockchain.io. So all the different impact projects that are out there now, they're actually on that website, so you can go and separate by industry and look. And I know for investors, traditional investors are like, oh, social impact, that's not sexy. Give me something else. But I would say, if you're a smart investor, you would understand that where the space is going is, as we speak right now, the government of California, they're developing their own blockchain for the cannabis industry to replace the banking. All those other blockchain projects that have been developed are going to be absorbed by the government, right? All those projects that need like government like sign off or whatever, they're going to be absorbed, right? All those FinTech platforms are going to be absorbed by FAGMA, Facebook, Amazon, Google, Microsoft, Apple, the conglomerate, right? And what's going to be really the projects that are going to be like lucrative and have a lot of, what do they call mass adoption, are going to be the social impact projects. So
I appreciate that. And I think the last kind of will round this off is from a VC perspective, because all of us entrepreneurs are like, great, who are you going to fund? Where's the growth happening? And so I think what will be really helpful is to understand with Decipher Capital, what are you seeing from a growth perspective, especially in this bear market?
Yeah, so I think the best way for me to, talk about the bear market is actually to level set with one of my favorite quotes. So Chris Dixon, who is now a GP at A16Z, or what used to be called Andreessen Horowitz, has this amazing quote where he says there's a couple of different ways that companies can die.
Right.
You can die through starvation, i.e. you don't have the access to capital that you want, or you can die through indigestion, right? Meaning you bit off way more than you can chew, and you're just having a really hard time processing it and building a company out of it. And I think that what we saw last year was companies die both ways, right? So you had a bunch of companies out there that did these huge ICOs, raised millions and in some cases billions of dollars. So type A, or the way of dying one, was they had really poor treasury management. All of their money was kept in Ethereum, Ethereum's now in the toilet. All of a sudden, they don't have the capital to be able to sustain their runway, and they're dying through starvation. And then option 2 is they literally raised so much money and did the yacht parties and did the crazy overspending without really having a goal, like a clear-cut vision as to where they were going to go. So they died through indigestion because they've just bit off way more than they can chew, and they're not really like being able to rally around a focal point and having the rigor that's required to build a company, right? So one thing that we're seeing that's pretty novel is this. We're seeing a bunch of companies that did ICOs that either don't have the capital or want the guidance that doesn't come from an ICO investment, actually switching gears completely and starting to look for VC or fund investment. So they've already done this, non-traditional way of raising capital, but now they're going back and they're trying to go to VCs and say, hey, we want you to take an equity stake in our company because we're looking for, more than just money. We're looking for guidance, support, and smart money. So that's an interesting novel thing that I wasn't expecting to see that has happened at least, a couple dozen times in the last few months.
And I think that talks to the fact that we're now moving the evolution of maturity for blockchain technology and the companies that go with it. So what kind of investment thesis do you have at Decipher Capital? And is there one, I don't know,
Yeah, no, I know where you're going.
selling, the one thing that you're saying, okay, they need to have this, and that's really our special sauce that we're looking for.
So whenever I, take on a new industry, I feel like it's really helpful, even when I'm explaining blockchain, right? It's really helpful to go through history and try to find a touch point that is similar, something that we're familiar to, something that will help us understand what's going on today. And I think that the closest corollary for blockchain is the post-dot-com bust, right? So in 2002, 2003, 2004, we went back and we really took a look at how people won in that particular trough and the way that people won. And there were some clear-cut winners that came out of it. USV's first fund, Brad Feld's first fund, Mike Maple's first fund, Chris Dixon's first personal fund came out of those 3 years. But all of these funds, they took on that particular trough and they started by investing in companies earlier than anyone else in the space was investing. And they didn't do it willy-nilly. They did it with a really, really concerted, high-touch, platform-based effort. So they went in and they said, you know what? We know the space is volatile. We know it's going to be a long time before you recover, but that's good. No worries. We're going to come in and invest in you, and we're going to be more like a team member than an investor that's sitting on mountain high that's only going to be useful when you need me to get out my black book, my Rolodex, right?
And that's so helpful because a lot of times VCs, they look at the portfolio companies and they support the top 30% that are growing like unicorns, and the other 70, they are just like, can you send me your update? And then you move on. And so it's exciting to hear this difference of thesis. So we're gonna kind of do one more round of questions and then open it up for questions. And so our last question and we'll start with you, it has to do with what milestones do you see for the next year? And, do you see the growth coming locally or globally, or what are you thinking as far as milestones?
So when I think about what is going to hit in the next few years, right? I love how Olga, talked about all of those pie in the sky ideas that seemed crazy when you guys were doing like a, throw spaghetti at the wall brainstorm session, but all of them came true, right?
Yeah, I mean, every single, it's
mind blowing.
Mind blowing and I'm sorry to interrupt, because my job as an attorney was to collect.
You know what, I'm gonna have you pass the microphone so it gets on the camera.
I'll give
I'll
it
back to you, but since you told
Take
be
it.
careful when you mention my name. I will dominate this space.
I'll share my microphone.
My job was to collect intellectual property from that session. And so I remember distinctly calling an outside lawyer, and the lawyer's like, were there any good ideas? And I'm like, well, there were good ideas, like to some extent, and they seem impossible to another. And I'm like, I don't know. I mean, and so we had this theoretical discussion of what's possible, and it turns out a lot of things are possible if you put your mind to it. That's where we are.
Yeah. So I think the interesting way to kind of parse through that and make it more digestible in terms of understanding, here I'll do a little switcheroo on the mic, is to think about things that are going to hit in the near term. We're talking, 2, 3, 4 years, and something that's going to hit in the long term. And a lot of these pie in the sky ideas will be able to, build on the infrastructure that we're in the process of building now, and will be able to be possible, even though they don't seem plausible right now. But the thing that is going to really help drive adoption is not the pie in the sky ideas. It's applications and use cases that really rely on capabilities that are native to the blockchain. So, but for the fact that you're utilizing blockchain technology, if you can't do something and all of a sudden you have a use case that's possible because you're utilizing blockchain, something that is drawing upon the intrinsic capabilities of the underlying technology, that's going to be a technology that hits. So we're talking about things like, distributed governance, distributed trust, privacy. For me, FinTech, there's a huge amount of smart contract usage that I think is going to be able to hit in probably the next 24 months. So that's how I kind of think about it.
So you talked about one thing that I thought was interesting, and I'd love for you just a quick soundbite on it. And it talked about the net new concept. And so for me, what I really resonated is rigor, because coming from sales and go to market, it's really this so what factor that I keep asking people. People laugh about it when I do my advising. They know my next question is like, so what? And so I think that your concept of net new really touches on that, and that's such an important piece to get out.
So I guess to kind of set the scene for this, whenever you are looking at a really dynamic landscape, that is in this particular conversation, at least blockchain, right? You're going to have to be able to place your bets based on where value is going to be destroyed, disrupted, created, and captured, right? So that using that lens, I think, is really helpful for me when I think through, different verticals in the space, different companies from an idiosyncratic basis in the space. So when I think about companies that are going to hit in the next 3-4 years and under, I think about whether or not they're providing a service or a tool that was not made possible or is not possible today, right? So it's a net new offering that's only possible because of the fact that it's built off of or leverages smart contracts, blockchain technology, et cetera. So for me, that idea of value creation and value capture, you're only going to be able to disrupt something if you're doing something that's not possible today, or if you're doing something that's possible today, but a hell of a lot better, right? So through that lens, it's easy for me.
And I appreciate this, and so one last thing, and then we'll pass it on, is so are you interested in getting thesis from startups, and is there a website that they should go to?
Yeah, absolutely. We're always interested in inbound. So if you guys know of anyone, or if you yourself has a blockchain or blockchain adjacent company that's looking for funding, please hit us up. We've got a pretty structured founder process on our website, which is decipher.capital, www.decipher.capital. So you can either come talk to me afterwards, Johnson, or just hit us up on the website. Thank you.
Now, I think it will be great to hear, you've talked about some of the milestones, which are so exciting, because for me, mass adoption happens through education and educating people, getting them comfortable with the terminology that we're using, because it is a different vernacular as far as what's a node, what some of these words, what's the difference between permissionable, not permissionable, that we use like no big deal, but it is a big deal for people who are not exposed to this space. So we'd love to hear what your milestones are.
Yeah, just continue to do the incubators and create more blockchain founders for social impact. Myself, my organization, Public Health Enterprise, we have a blockchain platform that's going to be launched this summer, which is super exciting because we've been, I know, doing the blockchain for social justice was one thing. Creating your own blockchain startup was a whole other thing completely, and I'm happy I had that experience to lead me to that point. But would I do this again? Never. So launching the platform this coming summer, not immediately launching with a token sale, still looking at what is the SEC going to roll out in order for us to kind of.
I'm sorry. Our lawyer on the panel is laughing very hard.
Because they're actually a joke right now as we speak. Because it's like you're trying to regulate something that's like always moving around. It's like me, I don't know, I couldn't even give you an analogy, and I always have a good analogy.
You're
So-
catching the firefly, you know?
Yeah, catching the
You
firefly.
see the light and you keep running, and then as soon as you're there with the jar, there's no light, and then you're trying to figure out where to go.
Or swat a fly, because fireflies are pretty cool. Wouldn't give them that much. And then another thing that we're working on right now is with the state of California. They are releasing a blockchain platform for, of course, like the cannabis industry and the whole banking issue, but we're working with them right now in terms of, I don't know if folks know this, but there's millions of dollars set aside from the revenue that is actually supposed to go for like youth development, prevention programming, et cetera. And we know that local government, they have a huge issue with money missing from the budget. So I'm just gonna give an example, like in Oakland, they had the whole sugar tax, right? That sugar tax in 1 year brought in $10 million. That's all supposed to go to philanthropy in the community. There's $8 million is missing that they don't know what happened to it. I wanna give another example, because this is what I love, policy. Prop 63, it's the Mental Health Act. So for every million, if you make over $1 million, you're taxed. There's a tax on that, and then that money's put into a fund for mental health services around the country. They released a report that millions of dollars is missing from the MHSA fund, right? And we're talking about they get over like $300 to $400 million a year. That's on top of the budget that the state and the local departments already have. Their money went missing. So now, right now, we're actually working on platforms to put that money for the youth on the blockchain, so we can see in real time who's accessing the funds, where's it going, how's it moving, who's utilizing it. Compare that to the ROI, which in this case will be the social impact. And then we're trying to do the same thing for those other funds like the Prop 63 money, et cetera. So that's honestly the only reason really why I'm in the blockchain space, is so that we can hold governments accountable and so we can print our own money.
So you've got a big year ahead of you, so we're excited to hear from a marketing perspective and
That's
strategy.
amazing, Stacey. Thank you. Hard to compete with that, right? Blockchain for good is also part of my passion, so I think it's amazing when there's that balance. What I wanted to talk about is, in terms of milestones, I advise for the Bureau and Dispatch. So in terms of zero knowledge analytics, the protocol that Dispatch has built is a protocol that is really focusing on secure data, big data, and making your data safe and storing this large amounts of blockchain data on the blockchain. So zero-based analytics is zero knowledge analytics is really important in this space. And I think, with recent scandals with like the Cambridge Analytica and, your data being stolen and breaches in security, it's massive. And, companies like the Facebooks and Googles and Amazons, et cetera, need to be held accountable for what they do with data. So I know recently the big companies are venturing into blockchain, and they've been hiring blockchain developers, and it's definitely, you can see it on the rise. And I know that also some of the banks are using stable coins or going into stable coins. So there's this huge surge of enterprises that are entering into the blockchain space. I think that's very exciting from a marketing point of view, because it's not just startups that, we focused on. It's the large enterprises too now.
Which is, in that kind of comes into the next thing, because I know there's probably a lot of people out here who might want to leverage your services from, as you offer a unique perspective, having worked for large companies like Intel and Ericsson throughout all of Africa. And so having myself have built out global channels, doing business in other countries is hard, let alone another continent. And so so how would somebody reach out to you to find out what services you can offer for them?
That's a great question. So as I mentioned, I advise and I consult, and I've got a client in New York that I'm actually helping at the moment scale her company, and she's launching into emerging markets. It's supply chain and fashion. So it's supply chain within the fashion industry, and it's very, very exciting because I feel like there's a massive role for blockchain in the supply chain industries. We've seen it coming in terms of, even tracing. There's a company called Freedom that is able to trace exactly where, whether there's slave labor involved in the clothes that you're wearing. Now, can you imagine adding blockchain to that? So you can actually trace whether the makeup or the jacket or the shoes that you bought Where did they come from? What's the source? And, is there slave labor involved, for example?
And I think this is personally I'm a huge manufacturing IoT person and enterprise, and the fact that you were providing truth that is accessible to many is a really huge advantage. So I think there's so much that is happening there.
Absolutely. So just, on that point, so I think with any companies that are pivoting and they're looking to, a lot of startups are very wary about marketing. They're not keen to splash a lot of money into it because they've been burned. So people are more cautious. So what I do is I do turnkey strategies, go-to-market strategies. I look at where the business needs to grow, whether it's purely within the US. If you're doing a exchange, launch, very different, exchange token launch, you can't have investors in the US because of the rules of the SEC. So you've got to look for foreign investment. So that's a perfect example where some companies have to go offshore. They cannot have investment from companies here within the US. So typically I help them bridge and go into other markets and, create marketing awareness, especially in tough markets in continents like Africa, Middle East, where there's so much diversity amongst all the different groups of people, and you market so differently to someone in Kenya versus someone in Nigeria versus someone, in Dubai. They're all such different markets. So
Thank you.
thank you.
And then last but not least, Olga, where do you see your milestones? You can talk about personally, I know that you have a book coming out, and then you also are dealing with strategy with QuantStep. So, and then what we'll do is open it up to questions.
I'll actually kind of summarize what everybody said and add to that. I agree with Rashida about the kind of applications that are unique to blockchain that kind of win at the end. I think that's definitely a really good long-term strategy. I think what I see in a short-term term happening is that a lot of blockchain is driven by efficiency. You see the kind of the classic. I never used the word classic with Walmart. I guess I will. So Walmart now classic example. Like the reason they do this is because they've always been efficient with their supply chain, and blockchain is another way to get there. And so everyone knows that that's what Walmart is, that they're really good at kind of being very efficient. And so now you see a lot of enterprises for that and many other reasons to kind of manage their supply chain and provenance and all that kind of stuff. I think that phase will also end, just like winter will end, just like spring will end. All of those things will end, and I think what will happen after is we will be solving problems that we have deemed impossible to solve before, and that's when the fun will really begin. So the reason to keep staying and starting in blockchain is for that time. Daisy, what 8 millions are missing, there's a term for that, it's called corruption. I grew up in the Soviet, I'm a little familiar with that. 8 million is a lot of millions to be missing, and there's a term for that. We actually is helping to solve a similar problem. QuantStep was helping World Economic Forum to scale a very similar solution in schools in Colombia. There is a different flavor of corruption going on there. Kids go to school not because they get educated, but they go to school to get a meal in many rural, very poor areas. And that function is given to various vendors who are not always giving a proper meal or not a meal at all. And so blockchain is a small part in that giant solution that will be scaled across Latin America and then other areas of the world. What I've learned a lot from that, and I'm sure you have that too, is that if you bring technology for a big problem like corruption, technology is a very, very small part, because we've held design thinking workshops and we had to have parents, students, administrators, prosecutors, the whole gamut. And so to solve a small problem of corruption, you have to set up a reporting mechanism, a prosecution mechanism, and a technology mechanism. So there is quite a few things that need to be in place. And California is definitely an exciting place to be, especially because independent of whether you voted for Governor Newsom, he definitely talked about technology, and he definitely talked about blockchain on his campaign trail. So definitely more and more to come. And then I agree with you.
You do?
I always
For change?
for a change, I'm always agreeable. I've been an etalon of agreement with you. There's a lot of going on in. It's time to go. Maybe I should end. I agreed with you, so now it's time to end. There's quite a lot of stuff going on both in startup and enterprises, and it's important to focus on the value that blockchain brings. Why do we do that technology, and what it can do that other things can't?
So what I'd love to do now is, I'm gonna stand up because we need to have the microphone. You pass the microphone. Does anyone have any question for anybody on the panel? So we'll start here. If you can say your name and what your project is and ask your question.
Hi everybody, my name is Ruby Ye and I'm really passionate about women in blockchain. I'm actually doing an online program called No Woman Left Behind that's teaching what I call forward-thinking mass market women about why they need to understand what blockchain is about, how it's going to change their lives. So Harshita, I actually have a question for you because you were talking about the net gain, right? That's where it's going to be the most obvious areas for blockchain. We're talking about FinTech and use. Can you actually mention a few specific companies that you feel are really right there on that, really the net efficiency part?
Yeah. So I love how you led in with that, right? I do think that logistics and efficiency and really cost-cutting measures, right? Like it's about the bottom line management when it comes to some of the more easy to adopt applications of blockchain. So if you look at tokenization or smart contracts, right? So there's a lot of different companies that are dabbling in this space, but I'll do you one better and I'll give you a specific example that I think will drive it home a little bit better than mentioning the company. So, for instance, in finance right now, if you are a real estate investor, you can trade public REITs, meaning any one of us can trade in and out of a public REIT, but the majority of the investment, like the vast majority of the trillions and trillions of dollars that are in real estate are in something that's called a private REIT, right? So private REITs have all of these rules and regulations mandated by the SEC around them. So one simple rule is that if you have more than 999 investors in a private REIT, you have this trigger that happens and you automatically are forced to go public. And everyone is scared of that because no one wants to do all of the legwork and be, exposed in the same manner that you have to do if you're forced to go public, right? So the way that you can trade in and out of these investments if you're a private REIT holder is so cumbersome. You have to go find an investor, you gotta go to the management committee, you gotta ask permission, you gotta do this, you gotta do that, you have to literally jump through hoop after hoop after hoop. Now imagine if that could be replaced by a simple smart contract that basically said, you know what, the smart contract mandates that only 999 investors and not one more can trade in and out of this thing. Only certain accredited investors can trade in and out of this thing. You can only do it at certain times, right? Literally, it's a piece of code, it's a piece of software that's the digital wrapper on something that we already do, but all of the cost associated with making those transactions is eliminated. That is a huge cost saver, right?
Okay, who else has another question for the panel? Another hands up.
Hi, my name is Nova. Started a company called the Bliss Particle, where I'm focusing on phytocannabinoid extractions from hemp oil for wellness properties. And I wanted to ask you guys, in terms of like the third generational blockchains, as well as other startups that are going outside of blockchain, such as Holochain or Hashgraph Hedera, how do you guys feel like those will actually disrupt the space and industry? And do you think that it will actually make blockchain irrelevant, or do you feel that they'll be able to coincide and coexist together?
Yeah, I'll take that. First of all, congratulations on what you're doing. That's amazing. I've never heard anyone doing that yet, so I know you're going to be lucrative in that. In terms of those different projects you mentioned, I will say this. I don't think that they're going to replace blockchain specifically. I think they'll be able to coincide. Because another thing too is like folks are looking at certain blockchains like IBM, Hyperledger, looking at AWS and what they're building, looking at Azure or Microsoft and what they're building, and it depends on what project you have. like what's the consensus mechanism, et cetera, that's gonna dictate what platform you're gonna wanna build on. And those other platforms, I know that they may be, because I know Hedera, they claim to be like, oh, we're decentralized, but it's not blockchain. I don't think that you need to, for some platforms that wanna emulate the functions of blockchain, that they don't need to specifically build on a blockchain, they can build on some of those. So I think they can coincide. And then I think another thing too is like, Hedera would be great for like, if I'm building like a blockchain for like the example that Olga talked about, like with the school. For like a big company that I have like thousands of people, it probably wouldn't be the best bet.
So full disclosure, I was a global judge for the Hedera hackathon, so I'm familiar with them. So the DAG world is, I think, what you're talking about, which is basically, if you look at, and this kind of goes to teaching the vernacular. So the vernacular is blockchain is one type of technology, DAG is another type of technology, but both of them are distributed ledger systems. And so from that perspective, what you're finding is that each of the protocols solves a problem that is to be addressed. So Hedera is very fast, they allow for micropayments. However, on the flip side, they also have permissible and not, they have both permissible and non-permissible depending upon what you're looking like. So another DAG that is out there is IBM Hyperledger, and so IBM Hyperledger is doesn't really, you can incorporate a token system, but it doesn't have a token system innately in it. And so what you need to do is step back and say, what are my requirements? And then figure out which protocol meets those requirements. On the blockchain space, there's Orbs, there's Neo, there's a whole plethora of what else is out there. Personally, I think that, and this is my personal opinion, micropayments is really going to be another game changer in, and I'm gonna say DLT space. And unfortunately, no one, when I say DLT, some people hear BLT and they think it's dinner. But, so that's why DLT isn't common. So a lot of people use the word blockchain to cover both of those pieces. But micropayments is a very huge space because what it does is so currently our financial systems do not really accommodate for payments under $10. So a simple example of this is I was building a website and I wanted a photo. Well, the photo was like $3 or I had to have a subscription for $80. And nothing made sense. But I know on my phone, I have thousands of pictures. What if I could just upload some of the cool pictures I take out the window and then someone could pay me 25 cents? So micropayments are going to enable this passive income that we will see happening and changing. Is that tomorrow? No, but it will definitely continue on. Another example of that is Karma is a protocol for doing good and you get Karma points. And I was just talking to the CEO, they've developed it without raising money and that's what they're about is doing good and giving Karma points to other people and building that out. So yes, I think that's very doable out there. It just really depends upon what you need. And so, other questions?
My name is Corey. I'm the founder of Blackchain and co-organizer for the Tech Trap House. In regards to looking at web hosting or data storage, when did you all foresee blockchain actually disrupting that space?
So, you know how earlier I said it's really easy to understand things through a historical lens. So I remember when I first started covering retail, one of the things I did was I went back to all of the investor reports from the early 90s and I just looked at how they were talking about e-commerce, right? And everyone, bar maybe 10% of the industry, thought that it was going to be so disruptive that we were going to buy everything online and brick and mortar stores were just going to completely go out of business. Well, the truth is, we fast forward 10, 15, 20 years, and it's not about replacing, it's about augmenting, right? So when I think about disruption, I think it's kind of folly to think about how something is going to be completely obsolete and never going to be used again. But the way we really should be thinking about it is where can things complement, where can this new technology, DLT, blockchain-based solutions, where can they complement what's pre-existing, and how can they work with pre-existing legacy structures to be able to drive adoption?
And I think we have time for one more question, maybe two. Any questions?
I'll ask one more if I can. No one else is asking.
Any other questions?
Okay. This is really a broad question about use adoption. Okay, it's so important, everybody talks about, right? And Daisy, you were making a reference about how like Facebook, all these big companies coming in, right? So what do you really see as the mass adoption? Is it gonna really take like Amazon and Facebook and all of them doing their blockchain version before we get to that point? And also historically, is it ultimately still gonna end up being dominated by these big companies? So there's sort of like two parts to the question, right? The adoption part and the domination part. Because I think that's really important in terms of, what is gonna happen for the industry as you see it now.
Right, thank you for asking me the question, Ruby. I think for the mass adoption and these different companies, I think that is what's gonna drive mass adoption, because now it's gonna be considered like this is something that's okay to be involved in. Because right now, blockchain still has a lot of stigma around it. One, because of the whole like black market and trafficking situation. Two, then you had the craziness with the ICOs and people losing money. And then three, some of the stuff that happened in Puerto Crypto. Those three events kind of created some stigma around the blockchain ecosystem. But as these big companies start to actually get in the game, more people are actually starting to see that it's actually safe to get involved. And more people are actually asking me questions, whereas before they thought I was a complete crick. I know. It's like, how, me? Really? Okay. But I
like the sweet face.
I know. Thank you. Even to the point where like I have like local government organizations reaching out like, hey, we want to get a blockchain workshop. Whereas before, when I first started reaching out, it was like, actually, we don't want nothing to do with that. And I think I saw like an article about JP Morgan releasing their own coin and some other blockchain, and like Facebook is going to create their own token built on the Dogecoin and things like that. That is what's going to create some of the mass adoption, but I'm still worried that marginalized communities that really actually need this tool for economic like development, they're going to lose out because they're not in the loop. Because you still have to have like a certain level of access and a certain skill set to be able to even understand the language, how to get a wallet, all of that. But I think another thing that's going to create mass adoption too is some of these existing apps like Cash App, for instance. Most of the folks that I know, they use Cash App versus like Venmo or PayPal. And Cash App, you can buy Bitcoin and Ethereum. So now a lot of folks from these communities, right, that wouldn't have, had access to this technology, now they can actually go ahead and buy crypto and whatnot because they have access to like the Cash App. So as more integrations happen, I think that's what's going to create the mass adoption, but education is still key.
So I'm gonna have Cindy Ann and Olga also respond, because I think, just another perspective, because I think this is an interesting question that is out there that people are asking.
Yeah, and also the second part about is ultimately still gonna be dominated by these big companies.
Of course.
That's really important. Yeah, you think the answer is of course?
I disagree.
Yeah.
I think it's a mixture. I think it's a mixture. So I think both Harshita and Daisy raised good points, and I think it's a mixture. So for example, there's a prediction that the blockchain industry will go up to 11 billion. It will be worth 11 billion in a few years. So that's what the Gartner analysts are saying. Big banking is getting into it. IBM's in it. Visa's gone into Deloitte. Everyone is going into the industry. It's a bit like IoT was, the buzzword for everyone in 5G. And now blockchain is also, part of the fourth industrial revolution. It's World Economic Forum is pushing it on the agenda. I believe that we have to have blockchain. I think it's absolutely essential in the future because, especially from a data security point of view. So if you look at zero knowledge analytics, big data and data security is one of the largest agendas on the World Economics Forum's drive at the moment. So I think privacy issues, we absolutely have to have some way of making data secure.
And I think it comes to the point of, so what? Blockchain, for just the word blockchain or DLT, is last year. This year is, so what problem am I solving? And so I think that's why it's probably a mix between large companies solving and it not. But this is my time to wind this down, and I wanna thank everyone for being here, for Shepherd, to Mullen, to actually hosting us, Pimo for putting it together, and then for all of the wealth of knowledge here is tens of years of blockchain, which is forever in our space. So you're basically looking at the OG of knowledge here because we have so much valuable information. So thank you everyone and look forward to next month. Thank you.